this is part 2 of the reloader type reloading device for the 410 shotgun shell. In the last video I got all my components together, got them drilled out, and in this video I'm going to finish putting the kit together and reloading some shotgun shells. So here are the components for my DIY free reloader type kit. I've got my #1 sizing die for plastic shells, got my #2 sizing die for brass shells, got my shell holder, my #1 depriming tool for brass shells, my #2 depriming tool for plastic shells, my primer seating tool, and my wad seating tool. So now that we've got everything assembled, let's reload some shells. I went ahead and added a coat of paint to my metal parts just kind of as a rust preventative measure, and I took a 45 ACP and filed it down to be able to cut wads to fit inside the shotgun shells. The brass shells that I'm going to use today to reload are actually fire formed from a 303 infield case. The plastic shells that I'm going to use to reload on this little project are 3-inch plastic shells and 2.5-inch plastic shells. So starting out, I'm going to go ahead and deprime my brass shells. There we go. Alright, so that works so far. Now that we've got our brass shells deprimed, it's time to move on to the plastic shells. And for that, I'm going to use my #2 decapper. There we go. With all of our shells deprimed, it's now time to size them. So I'm going to start off with my plastic shells first. Now I'm going to do my brass shells, and I'm just going to take and set the sizing die on top of this 2-inch nipple. So we got one sized back down. Now that I have all my shells deprimed and sized, I'm going to test fit them to see if they're going to work in my gun right. The brass shells seem like they're going to work fine, so let's try the plastic. That one's a little bit snug. The sizing die worked well on the brass, and the plastic ones are a little bit on the tight side, but I can deal with that. Now that I know my shells are sized right, I'm going to go ahead and reprime them. For my brass cases, I'm going to use large rifle primers. And for the shotgun shells, I'm just going to use a standard 209 primer. To get the primer started, I'm going to use a 12-gauge wadding. And I'm just going to set the primer on there, place my shell over the primer, and then grab my piece of bamboo and tap it in there. And once I get it started, I'm going to move this out of the way and just kind of tap it in there. There we go. So that's pretty flush. Now I'm going to try one without the 12-gauge wadding, just to see if it'll detonate the primer by doing it this way. And it doesn't appear to. Now that we have all our brass shells primed, it's time to move on to the plastic shells. And I'm going to use the same method of setting the primer on the 12-gauge wadding, putting the shell over it, and then put my piece of bamboo in there, just to get it started. There we go. And again, I'm going to try to do this one without setting the wadding underneath it to see if it'll detonate the primer. There's number 2. And it doesn't appear to try to detonate the primers doing it this way. So with all of my shells reprimed, I'm going to go ahead and cut me some over powder cards. To cut my over powder cards, I'm just going to use some cardboard. In the past, I've used leather as an over powder card and an overshot card, and it seems like over time that leather dries out and shrinks, so I'm just going to go with cardboard on these. Now that I have powder in all my shells, I'm ready to insert the wads, and to do that I'm just going to use the piece of bamboo that I have and my little shell holder. That's holding in the powder. Now let's do it on the brass shell, see how it goes. Yeah, it's working pretty good. For my brass shells, I'm going to use slugs. So I've got my slug in there, and I'm going to place an overshot card on top of that. Then I'm going to take and write S on it for slug. There's number 2, and I'm going to place the overshot card on it as well. For my plastic shells, I'm going to go with a double-aught buck, kind of as a crackhead deterrent, and I'm going to load them into shot cups. And again, I'm going to put overshot cards on them. There's one. And on these, I'm just going to write 0, 0. And on this particular one, because the star crimp is kind of still there, I'm just going to fold it over with a punch. With the overshot wads in there, I'm just going to take and put a little bit of glue around the top of them. So here we have our 6 shells loaded and ready for use. I happen to find a spare die box that I'm not using, and that's when I'm going to put my 410 reloading kit in. And I'm going to throw me a few primers in there as well. So there we have the 410 reloader kit, and it literally cost me $0 and about 30 minutes of my time. So there you have it, a 410 reloader type reloading device. The only thing that it really cost me was about 30 minutes of my own time, and that's building the parts, painting the parts, testing the parts, and then actually using them to reload so that I could make sure that this was a reliable system. And if you have any ideas on any type of scavenge build that you are interested in or like to see, post them in the comments of any of my videos, and I'll see what I can come up with. So thank y'all for watching. We'll see y'all next time.